think term limits should remain in New York for reasons I can explain, but changing to 3 terms is definitely good for the city, particularly as a policy point of view, particularly for the city council. And the city council has been hurt relative to mayors by having only 2 terms. On the question of whether it's okay to act by legislation, I believe it is okay for 4 reasons. They've sort of been touched on. One is that this would be a tinkering with term limits, not a fundamental change. The second is that referenda, particularly when the question is detailed and subtle, like changing from 2 to 3 terms, are very blunt instruments. Turnout is low, money makes a huge difference, the money is very influential. The third thing is those referenda were voted on before there's any actual experience with what term limits has done to the city, and as I say, I think it's hurt the city council badly, the 2 terms. And finally, incumbents who support changing from 2 to 3 terms can be challenged in an election in 1 year, and people can vote against them if they disagree with the incumbents on either policy grounds or process grounds. So for all those reasons, I think it's okay to act by legislation. However, I think 2 things need to be clarified before the City Council would vote on the pending bill. The first relates to this Charter Commission that the Mayor has said he's going to appoint, that he's agreed to put Mr. Lauder on, and where the Mayor has said the Charter Commission will put before the voters the question of term limits. That's just wrong. The Charter Commission will not put the issue before voters unless they conclude the change made this year was a mistake. Now, I think the Mayor has to clarify his remarks before, if I were a councilman, I would vote for this bill. Because if his remarks stand, the flavor is that this should be a bill passed for 1 election and 1 election only. And Oliver Capel was right out front on the point 3 weeks ago or so that we cannot have a bill that applies to just the current incumbents. That would be self-serving in the worst way. So what the Mayor needs to do for me to be able to say this bill should be passed is to publicly say he supports changing to 3 terms on policy grounds for the long-term future of the city, and that he will testify to that effect before a Charter Commission. The second thing I think the Mayor has to do before I personally would recommend voting for this bill, much as I hope these problems can be cured, is the Mayor has said, look, it's okay to go against the will of the people, your point. The Mayor said it's okay to go against the will of the people because I can be challenged in an election next year. Now that sounds good, but it's not good if that election is not a fair fight. So what the Mayor needs to do, contrary to what his colleagues, his staff have said in the New York Times about a week ago, where they said the Mayor will spend up to $100 million in the next election. The Mayor, if he truly believes the way to test the decision to go to 3 terms is to have an election in which he can be challenged or supported for having done that, he has to commit to keep abiding by the same limits that every other person running for office has to abide by. His staff has said he'll spend up to $100 million. Why that would be necessary when you're a 2-term incumbent who the world knows your record and largely thinks very highly of your record. But his staff has said spend up to $100 million when the opponents of the Mayor are limited to spending $6 million. That's not a fair fight. And so those 2 clarifications need to be made by the Mayor before, in my judgment, this piece of good legislation should be passed.
Thank you very much.